Sure.
Here's a more engaging and detailed version of your story with richer language and a smoother flow. Welcome back, everyone. Thanks for joining me today. I have a story to share, one that's been weighing on me for a while. I've gone over it in my mind 100 times, trying to make sense of it, but no matter how I break it down, I keep ending up in the same place, stuck. I don't know if I'm overthinking or being too sensitive, and that's why I'm here, telling you this. Because maybe one of you has been through something similar, or maybe you'll hear this and know exactly what I should do. But before I dive into the dilemma, you need to hear the whole story, the way it unfolded, the moments that built up to this. Because if you've ever been in a relationship, you know that sometimes, it's not about the one thing that happens. It's about what it reveals. So sit back, listen, and when it's over, let me know what you think. Am I making too much of this, or is this one of those things that only gets worse over time? Carolyn and I go way back. We've known each other since high school, practically forever. But back then, we weren't a couple. We were just two kids who crossed paths in crowded hallways, sat in the same classrooms, and shared casual conversations that never went beyond school walls. She was someone I admired from a distance, the kind of girl who seemed effortlessly out of my league. After graduation, life took us in different directions, and we lost touch. I had no reason to think our paths would ever cross again, let alone that we'd one day be engaged. But life has a way of surprising you. Fate, or maybe just coincidence, brought us back together in college. It started with a few chance encounters in the library, a few conversations that picked up where we had left off, filling in the gaps of lost time. Before I knew it, we were spending time together, not because we had to, but because we wanted to. I can't pinpoint the exact moment when she stopped being just an old classmate and started becoming something more, but somewhere along the way, we fell into step with each other. Dating Carolyn felt natural. It wasn't rushed or complicated, it just worked. Maybe it was because we already knew so much about each other, or maybe we were just at the right point in our lives for something real. Whatever the reason, it felt steady. Not perfect, no relationship is, but solid. Years passed, and nothing changed, at least, not in a way that made me question us. We weren't just two people in a relationship anymore, we were building something. So when I proposed and she said yes, it felt like the most natural step in the world. Everything about it felt right. She was the one. I had no doubts. But looking back now, I wonder if I should have paid more attention to the little things. Because sometimes, it's not the big moments that define a person, it's the small ones. Marriage, to me, isn't just the next chapter in life. It's not about a big wedding or checking off a milestone because that's what people expect when you hit a certain age. Marriage is personal. It's something I've thought about for years, something I want to get right from the start. Because I know what it looks like when it all falls apart. I grew up in a house where love didn't last. My parents started out happy, at least, that's what I've been told, but by the time I was old enough to understand, all I saw were the cracks. The fights, the distance, the resentment that lingered in unspoken words and heavy silences. I remember lying in bed at night, listening to their arguments through the walls, voices growing sharp and angry, followed by the quiet that was somehow worse. Because that's when I knew, they weren't just mad. They were done. Eventually, my dad packed his things and left. My mom did her best to hold everything together, but even after the fighting stopped, the damage was already done. I watched her struggle alone. I saw how my father drifted further away. And from all of that, I made myself a promise. If I ever got married, it wouldn't be like that. I wouldn't let love turn into something bitter and broken. I wouldn't let it become a war of unspoken words and unmet expectations. If I was going to build a life with someone, it would be different. It would last. That's why being with Carolyn felt like finding something I never thought I'd have. She came from the kind of home I had only wished for, parents who had been together for decades, not just existing under the same roof but genuinely happy. They made decisions as a team, laughed together, and created a space where love didn't just survive, it thrived. From the first time I visited their home, I felt it. The ease. The warmth. There was no tension in the air, no underlying bitterness. Her parents welcomed me like I was already part of the family, and for the first time, I saw what a healthy relationship looked like up close. Carolyn carried that same warmth. She understood my fears without me having to explain them. But now, I can't ignore this feeling in my gut. Because sometimes, love isn't about the big, sweeping gestures. It's about the small moments that tell you who someone really is. And now, I'm wondering, have I missed something? Have I ignored signs I should have seen? And most importantly, Am I making a big deal out of nothing, or is this the kind of thing that only gets worse? That night is burned into my memory. It was supposed to be just a casual evening, a way to escape the stress that had been piling up over weeks of wedding planning. Carolyn and I had been drowning in decisions, venues, guest lists, endless details that had turned what should have been an exciting time into a series of tense discussions. So when our friends suggested meeting up for drinks, it felt like the perfect excuse to step away from it all, to breathe, to just be us again. The bar was lively, filled with that perfect hum of music and conversation that made everything feel easy. Our group had claimed a long high-top table in the back, squeezing in close, drinks in hand, trading stories and laughter. I had my arm draped over the back of Carolyn's chair, and she leaned into me slightly, relaxed, sipping on her cocktail. It felt comfortable. Familiar. The kind of night where you forget about everything else for a while. The conversation flowed, jumping from work stories to inside jokes, the kind of effortless chatter that happens when you're surrounded by people who know each other well. And, as always happens in a group with couples, the topic eventually shifted to relationships. Jordan, one of my closest friends, launched into a story about forgetting his anniversary, a mistake that, judging by his dramatic retelling, had nearly cost him his relationship. He exaggerated every detail, throwing up his hands in mock panic. "I mean, come on," he groaned, shaking his head. "I love the girl, but it was our dating anniversary. We've been together 3 years. I thought we were past celebrating every single one." The table erupted in laughter. Even Carolyn chuckled, shaking her head as Jordan continued. "She wouldn't let it go for days," he went on, still playing it up for effect. "Said it proved I didn't care about the relationship. Man, I took her out to dinner the next night, got her flowers, made a whole thing of it. But nope, damage was done." It was the kind of light-hearted, teasing conversation that happens all the time. No one was taking it too seriously. And without really thinking, I nudged Carolyn with a grin. "Sounds familiar, huh?" I said playfully. "At least Jordan forgot a big date. You got mad at me for not remembering what color dress you wore last weekend." It was a joke. The kind of teasing couples do all the time. I expected her to roll her eyes, maybe shove my shoulder with a playful shut up the way she usually did. But the second the words left my mouth, I felt the shift. Her face changed instantly, her smile vanishing as if I had flipped a switch. Then, before I could even process what was happening, she snapped, loudly. "Oh, you, Brandon, asterisk." Her voice cut through the noise of the bar, sharp and heated. Heads turned from nearby tables. Conversations around us stuttered to a stop. I barely had time to react before she kept going, her words spilling out in a rush, as if they had been building up for a long time. "You're actually worse than Jordan, you know that?" She shot at me, her voice thick with frustration. "At least he forgets important stuff like anniversaries. You just don't pay attention at all. Ever. You never remember details. You're always clumsy with things, and you act like it's no big deal." Her eyes flashed, her tone laced with something far deeper than irritation. This wasn't just about a joke. This was something that had been simmering beneath the surface, waiting for a moment to explode. The energy around us shifted instantly. The warmth, the laughter, all of it vanished. Our table fell silent. Jordan, who had been so animated just moments before, suddenly seemed very interested in his drink. Mark cleared his throat awkwardly. Lisa, his girlfriend, flicked her gaze between Carolyn and me, wide-eyed, as if waiting for me to say something, anything. But I couldn't. I sat there, frozen, caught somewhere between shock and humiliation. I wasn't sure what stunned me more, the way she snapped so aggressively in front of our friends, or the things she had actually said. Had she really been sitting on these feelings all this time? Was this just about one offhand joke, or had she been keeping a list of all my shortcomings, waiting for the right moment to throw them at me? For a second, it didn't even seem like she realized the scene she was making. But then, the anger that had fueled her outburst drained from her face, replaced by something else, regret. Embarrassment. Her shoulders, which had been tense, suddenly dropped slightly, like she wanted to take the words back but didn't know how. She reached for me. My arm. That was the first thing she reached for, her fingers grazing my sleeve, her voice softer now, almost pleading. "Calm down. I love you." It felt less like an apology and more like a desperate attempt to smooth over the damage, to hit a reset button, to pretend the last 30 seconds hadn't just happened. But that wasn't how this worked. Some things, once said, don't just disappear. They sit there, heavy and unmovable, a permanent shift in the atmosphere. And everyone at the table felt it. The carefree energy that had filled the night evaporated in an instant, replaced by a thick, uncomfortable silence. A few awkward seconds stretched into something that felt much longer, everyone suddenly aware that they had witnessed something they weren't supposed to see. Moments ago, we had been laughing, trading stories, caught up in the easy rhythm of the night. Now, the air felt tainted, like we had stepped into a different reality. I hadn't expected that reaction. The joke wasn't deep. It wasn't meant to stir anything. But the way she snapped, the venom behind her words, unsettled me. Because words like that don't just come out of nowhere. No matter how much I wanted to shrug it off, to tell myself it was nothing, I couldn't. The mood had shifted, and it was clear the night was over, even if no one wanted to admit it just yet. One by one, people started making excuses to leave, early mornings, long drives, sudden exhaustion that hadn't been there minutes ago. I didn't say much as we walked out of the bar. Carolyn didn't either. Normally, after a night like this, we'd linger, maybe sit in the car for a while, talking, decompressing. Not this time. The air between us was thick with everything we weren't saying. When the moment came to say goodnight, I hesitated. I wanted to act like it didn't bother me, but it did. And as much as Carolyn tried to play it cool, I could tell she felt it too. I watched her walk to her car, watched her taillights disappear into the night. Then I went home, lay awake in the dark, and replayed everything in my head. The next morning, my phone rang. Carolyn. For a second, I debated letting it go to voicemail. But avoiding her wouldn't fix anything. So I answered. "Hey," she said, her voice careful, measured. "I just wanted to call and, apologize." I didn't say anything right away. I waited. "I had too much to drink," she continued. "I wasn't thinking straight. I didn't mean any of that, Brandon. You know I love you. I just got carried away." I wanted to believe her. Alcohol makes people emotional. It makes them say stupid things, act out of character. I've seen it happen 100 times. But then a thought lodged itself in my mind, one I couldn't shake. What if alcohol doesn't make people say things they don't mean? What if it makes them say things they've been holding back? What if it strips away the filter and shows what's really underneath? That's what scared me. Because if that's how Carolyn truly saw me, someone she could curse at, humiliate, tear down in front of our friends, then what happened when we were married? What happened when it wasn't just a drunken outburst in a bar, but a real argument, in real life, in our home? Would she talk to me like that then? Would she get mean, dismissive, cruel? I've seen marriages fall apart before. I know how it starts. A harsh word here. A dismissive comment there. Little things adding up, chipping away at the foundation. The love might still be there, but it gets buried under resentment. And once that happens, it's only a matter of time before everything crumbles. I grew up in that kind of house. I watched my parents go from loving each other to barely being able to stand in the same room. I saw how it unraveled, slowly at first, then all at once. And I swore I would never let that happen to me. But now here I was, engaged to the woman I loved, wondering if I was ignoring a red flag. And if it was a warning, was I already too deep to walk away? So I need to ask you, has anyone been through something like this? Have you ever seen a side of someone you love that made you stop and wonder if you really knew them at all? How did you handle it? Am I overthinking this? Or is this the kind of thing that only gets worse? I don't have the answers right now. But maybe some of you do. I'll be reading the comments. Tell me, if you were in my shoes, what would you do?